Good afternoon, Tony Dattino, chairman of the USA Memory Championship and founder of the USA Memory event. And I just continue to find these little nuggets as I go through and during my time here in New York. Just find, as I take this off the shelf, I can see why this has been such a winning book in the book world, and where people, when they read it, actually contact us. It's been one of the best directives to the USA Memory Championship of anything that we've ever done, and our own campaigns. And as people have read this and they read about myself and the USA Memory Championship, it just continues to get people to contact us and want to learn more about it. And so I just, being in New York for a month, I just have continued to pick it up and reread it. I've read it twice already, and just understand why people do it. But here was a couple more points that we talk about here. What would it take for somebody like me to train for the USA Memory Championship? That was a question that Josh Foer asked Tony Buzan. And Tony is the author of Use Your Perfect Memory and Use Both Sides of Your Head, and got more than 100 books on the human brain. And here's Josh asking him, when he met him, what would it be like for me to train? And the answer is that there are some skills and that you can learn from some prior mental athletes that have done well at the competition, and you'll be able to learn those skills, but you need to practice them. And so it entered Josh into the world of, could you actually learn how to improve your memory, which is the whole point of the USA Memory Championship. And so Josh actually contacted a couple of your worldwide memory championships. He didn't go to the US, he opted to go to the worldwide. And he wanted to be able to train his memory. But not only did he want to train it, he wanted to understand it. And so the book that he wrote says, I spent a year trying to train my memory, but understand its inner workings, its natural deficiencies, and its hidden potential. And to me, that third one, that understanding it and finding its hidden potential, is the jackpot of what the Memory Championship is all about. We want to be able to, and it's really what my work has been all about for almost 30 years now, which is, how do you teach people the fundamentals of how their brain works and how it connects and organizes and associates and builds connections into your memory? And how does that memory go from short term to long term? So he has in the book, as you go find, he brings a curve in here, which we call the forgetting curve. And now I'm trying to find I should have marked this out here, but it's the forgetting curve, which is basically, what's the process by how we learn information, and then within an hour or a day or a week, we forget it. And so inside the Maximum Memory Mastery online course, I think what Michael Dattino has done in the development and the creation of that course is he's really touched on one of the simplest and most basic fundamentals of how do you move information from short term to long term, from what the brain will then retain and recall and create and communicate with and be able to utilize as you go forward. And that's the forgetting curve that Josh talks about here. Now the question becomes, gee, well, what can you do about the forgetting curve? What is it that, okay, I get it, I understand there's some science behind when we're likely to forget things and how fast we can forget, especially if we're not focused on it or it's something we don't want to remember. So when people are taking tests in schools, or they have exams that they have to go through, or something that they're trying to remember they're supposed to do next weekend, if we haven't made a deliberate focus and we're not going to make some effort to think about how are we going to put this into our brain so we retain it, then it's likely to kind of be viewed by the brain as unimportant information. It's not something that I want to retain for a really long period of time. So it's okay. It's trivial. You know what? I can let it pass through, meaning one ear in one ear, right, in one ear and out the other. But how do we change that? If it is something that we want to remember, if it is something that is important to us, and it is something that we want to have a retention of, what can we do to help review it and keep it in there so it stays for the longer term? And Michael covers that very, very well in his online USA Maximum Memory online course, by really showing people first what the curve is and what the likelihood is, but then how do you avoid the dips? How do you avoid, okay, I'm just going to go drop, drop, drop. How do I bring it back up so that there's a retention and there's an ability to recall? And what's my self-review process? And what's the best way for me to take something, learn it, then review it in what cycle of time? And then how might I best do that review so that eventually I can retain it for long term? And so we've been working with a student that is in the process of going for a psychology exam, and we're taking him through that curve. As he's learning and he's developing, we're sharing some tools with him and some methods of what he can do and how he can practice. He has put the work in. He's been a phenomenal student who has really changed his thinking about his own ability to organize, associate, and recall information. And you see the results in the Zoom sessions that Michael and I have done with him. But we're following this curve, okay? So we capture some information, we then review that information, and then we go back to the next 24 hours and we say, okay, what are we going to start with? Well, we're going to start with a 5-minute review. And we're going to look at and say how much of that information can he actually write down, if we can engage in writing things down. It's amazing how we've gone to the iPhones and Androids and laptops and just think we're going to remember things. We just pull it back up on there versus, well, why don't we keystroke it in and let's create notes for ourselves. I'm okay, that's as good as writing. Let's get it down and let's go back and look at what we wrote down. But before we do, let's think about what is it that we did write down. And so the act of learning and then writing it down, then thinking about what did we write down, starts to engage multiple areas of our brain. So it's all part of the review cycle that I have found Michael has just done a fantastic job of really highlighting for people the stages of how to move from this forgetting curve that Josh talks about here and learning the understanding of how memories work and how you move from short to long term. And then what I love in terms of what he wrote here is in finding this hidden potential, which is the essence of the USA Memory Championship. Anyone can do this. Anyone can improve their memory. And so I continue the mantra of anyone can improve their memory. But there's a process that we learn. It's like going back to school, and this school is all about how do you encode memories from short term to long term so that you retain them for the long haul and they just don't kind of go in and go out in the space of, a day or less. And I always recall reading the study, it was done on the top graduates of a Harvard graduating class, and one of the tests that they were given, they re-gave them the same test 30 days later. And the students that scored the highest were the group in the study group, and 30 days later, the majority of the students that had done super in the test failed it 30 days later. I'm not sure what that's to say. I guess it depends on the subject. You certainly want them to be one of their medical students. You certainly wouldn't want them to be somebody that needed that information for the long term because of a career. But the point of the matter is there is a process by how we do move from where we absorb information and how we decide in our brains what to keep and hold on to and what to let go and let it pass through. And so in the Maximum Memory Mastery, I think Michael has done a brilliant job of really putting some of the teaching elements for people to follow if it's important for them in terms of their studies, in terms of their work performances, in terms of jobs that they're applying for, how to move information into a longer term prospect. So with that, this is our Monday evening. We're back. Ev and I are back into the city tomorrow. Ev is the love of my life. We've been together. Come another week, we'll be together 28 years. And she's had some eye surgery, and she's going for another eye surgery tomorrow, where she has to just keep her head down for 2 weeks. Just imagine living your life keeping your head down for 2 weeks and not being able to pick your head up. And she eats with her head down. She sleeps with her head down. She watches TV in this gizmo that we got from a Comfort Solutions company and watches it through a mirror. And it's a tough 2 weeks for her, but she's an amazing woman, has incredible strength and determination. And she is clearly somebody who, when she decides to do something, it's going to get done. It's going to get done well. So with that, you still see me here in New York. I'm still bundled. It was like 41 degrees when I walked outside today. I'm not enjoying the cold. I miss the swimming that I do in Florida. I miss the bike riding that I do outside. But we've got a couple more weeks here, and then hopefully all will go well for her surgery tomorrow, and I'll be back in Florida in a couple of weeks. So with that, you have a good night, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.